Mike was born in Madisonville, Kentucky. He graduated from Murray State University with his Bachelor's of Science in Wildlife Biology. He also minored in both agriculture and chemistry, which I would not have put those two together.
Within one class of having a minor in both of them. So.
So immediately after school, I think before he graduated even, or attended the ceremony, he went to work with what was then called Kentucky Department of Fish and Game at the Sloughs Wildlife Management Area. He was promoted through the ranks, worked in several different positions and locations, but ultimately spent over 30 years as the supervisor at Sloughs WMA. As you can imagine, distilling 34 years of service to Kentucky into a brief introduction leaves a lot out. But through his work, Mike has also worked as a contract employee with the Nature Conservancy, and now more recently, he worked with the Conservation Fund to conduct waterfowl surveys. Mike considers his efforts in helping to establish the Green River National Wildlife Refuge as one of his greatest achievements. Additionally, he and a small group of conservation-minded people have successfully launched Friends of Green River National Wildlife Refuge Group, which they hope will help their Fish and Wildlife Service implement the planned fish and wildlife habitat management objectives. Without further ado, here's Mike.
Thank you. This will be pretty informal. I mean, if you have a blazing question, hold your hand up, and I'll probably say, if you give me 5 seconds, I'll answer it, or I won't. But this is a show I've worked on presented for about 5 years, and I keep revising it. So if any of you have seen it before, I apologize, but it is fresher than it was the last time. So we'll see what we can do. Green River National Wildlife Refuge. How did it happen? How did it finally happen? It's the cat of 9 lives. And if anybody will keep a count here in just a minute, I think that sentence will come out to play a little better. It was so close to becoming established so many times that the frustration level just reached the end. How many people know how many national wildlife refuges are or were in Kentucky? Gary does. Gary?
1.
I was going to say 1.
3. The first national wildlife refuge in Kentucky was Kentucky Woodlands, which became a part of the Tennessee Valley Authority Land Between the Lakes. It was in place from 1936 to 1963. That was Kentucky's big thing of having a refuge, and it got absorbed by the TVA operation. Of course, when you have a refuge of a few thousand acres and it suddenly gets sucked into 160,000 acres, that's a positive thing for wildlife and wildlife habitat. Also, about this much of Reelfoot National Wildlife Refuge sticks into Kentucky. And I mean literally this much, like 300 acres. And about 1990, and this will come up in the presentation a little later, Clark's River National Wildlife Refuge was established. And now, as of 2019, Green River National Wildlife Refuge is established. So we have had 3, because I don't count Reelfoot, it's all in Tennessee. Back about 1958, a good friend of mine, one of my lead biologists that took me under his wing when I went to work for the department in '78. He and a lot of the biologist staff were sitting around after a staff meeting in Elizabethtown, probably drinking soda pop with foam on top. And got to remember that back in those days, we had like 6 biologists in the whole state and had a wildlife division that had less than 25 employees, and half of those were based in Frankfort at the game farm. And about a quarter of them were based at Ballard County Wildlife Area. They were sitting around, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was looking at opportunities to expand refuges in Kentucky, because they could see the writing on the wall that Kentucky Woodlands was fixing to be eaten up by the Tennessee Valley Authority. So they were looking for an alternative site. One of the sites that Lee K. Nelson bumped out at that time was Scuffletown Bottoms. Some of you all may know Lee. Lee was an Owensboro native, worked here for about 35 years. But he was, if you look in the Webster's Dictionary under Kentucky gentleman, that's his picture next to it. I only saw him mad once in 30 years, and I swear you could have poured gasoline on his boots and lit him and he never would have got mad. I mean, he was a fine person. But Scuffletown Bottoms is this area. This is the confluence of the Green River and the Ohio. Newburgh Lock and Dam's right here. Nice big flat area. And it's one of those magical places that when I flew waterfowl surveys for 30 years for the department, that when floodwaters were backing into that property, during the fall or late spring, waterfowl fell into it like rain. Now, as the water got too deep or too shallow, they would leave it. But it was just one of those magical places. In response to the service getting interested in Scuffletown, and you'll hear me use the term Scuffletown a long time, then I'm going to change the name. The Department of Fish and Wildlife bought us 2 tracts of land near that, what was part of the Walnut Bottoms area in Green River and Henderson County, and established it as part of the Sloughs Wildlife Management Area, the first acquisition of Sloughs area. This is 1961. So we jumped from 58 to 61. We picked up 2 tracts of land. And the Ash Flats unit is a magical place. It's 185 acres scattered in 2 tracts a half mile apart. You can't do much of any of it. But it was the initial land purchase. And this, you don't hardly see it in this picture, but this is Green River floodplain right here, and it's in flood in that picture, and that's ice and snow on it right there. The idea was that the department would buy some state land next to what was going to be Scuffletown. Didn't happen. First time that Scuffletown fell off the face of the earth. We bounced forward, let me back up one notch. We bounced forward to about 1978. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in concert with the U.S. Department of, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. EPA, all got to nosing around about a bottomland hardwood restoration project for the entire Midwest. You know, what they could do to reestablish bottomland hardwoods, which was considered a critical habitat, and how they could do it. And this, I went to work in '78, so this work happened before I started. And they produced a report called Bottomland Hardwood Restoration in the Midwest. Scuffletown was one of those mini project areas. Turns out that all of that work got done in the middle and lower Mississippi basin, and the Ohio got left out. So everything's chugging along, and like I said, we're up to 1978. About mid-1980s, and I'm at work now, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service gets nosing around real hard again about a national wildlife refuge in Kentucky. There's a list of 3 sites put together in Kentucky. Wycliffe Bottoms, which is in Ballard County, and we're on the Ballard-Carlisle County line. Scuffletown, which is number 2, and then one over on O'Bine Creek, way down on the southwest corner of Kentucky. Wycliffe got bumped out because they had an active paper mill within about 3 miles of the site, and they couldn't get Class 1 air quality rating over most of the refuge most of the year the way the wind blew. O'Bine Creek got thrown out of the mix because the landowners basically threatened to lynch everybody that was involved with it. They didn't want anything to do with another refuge. You got to remember that Reelfoot's right down the road about 50 miles. Tennessee National Wildlife Refuge is right down the road about 75 miles. Tennessee has 2 other refuges down in Mississippi, so they don't want any more refuges in West Kentucky. So that leaves Scuffletown. It's set down here high and mighty. It's already been looked at. It's already been targeted once as the hardwood site, restoration site. Looked at real hard, and all of a sudden, political intervention got into it. I'm retired now, so I can say some of these things. Used to be that the Department of Fish and Wildlife was very closely tied to whatever was happening in the governor's office. And word came down through channels that if, and if stood about this tall, if there was another national wildlife refuge in Kentucky, it would be in the purchase. Got to remember, they've already got 160,000 acres at TVA, and the state's got a wildlife refuge at Ballard. But if there's another one, it's going to be in the purchase. And miraculously, Clark's River comes out of the ashes, and I got assigned to part of the field duties to do some of the preliminary field evaluation on it. And Clark's River is a fine site. I mean, good property. But Scuffletown got shoved off the map. O'Bine Creek's gone. Wycliffe, or the Mayfield Creek bottoms is gone, but Clark's River comes to fruition. And in 1990, we've got Clark's River National Wildlife Refuge, our first refuge we've had since 1963. So things are chugging along. And I-69 gets conversation started again. I-69 has been something that's been rattling around since before my career started. And there was, apologize for a poor picture of a poor picture, but there were several corridors preliminary picked out, and I was on a liaison team with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and Indiana DOT and Kentucky DOT and the U.S. EPA and the Corps of Engineers and 17 other alphabet agencies. And one of the sites that they wanted to do, I won't show it on the TV screen, was if you jumped across the river on I-69 at Newburgh and Angel Mound State Park, you went right across Scuffletown and went over here, and you had to jump the Green River again, then you could plumb back into the parkway system. Not a bad idea. Of course, some of the Indiana folks are going to have some major heartburn about building I-69 on top of Angel Mounds. Jumping across the river there is pretty narrow, not a real big issue. You land in Scuffletown, and for those of you who have never been in Scuffletown Bottoms, there's a whole series of oil wells on the upper end of it, and they're all sitting on like 14 to 16 foot scaffoldings, and there's a power line higher than they are, and when the floodwater gets in there, corn stalks hang in the power lines. So you're about to build a road that's going to have to be levied like you're going to the Keys in Florida, from here back to high ground past the Green River. And I don't know about you, but I always figured it was probably simpler to build one bridge than it was two, because if we cross the Ohio at Scuffletown, we got to cross the Green. You know, just a thought. So throw out the idea, okay, we're about to build a bridge, we're about to build an interstate highway, we're about to put on pilings 16 to 20 feet tall, a roadway that's going to look like something like you're going to the Florida Keys. If you have an emergency out there, only two things that are going to get there are going to be foot traffic and a helicopter. So during part of the year, and I led one of the tours with Indiana DOT and Kentucky DOT staff, and the lady said, "What are those pump jacks, those oil pumps sitting there?" And I said, "That's what pumps oil here." And I said, last year when there was a flood, they took the electric motors off of them, chained them to the heads of the ponies, and cranked them up as high as they could, and half of them still got wet. And the Indiana engineer said, "Well, we'll just levee the road." I said, when the river is in flood here, you're not talking about a half a mile, you're talking 5 miles of river. You can't just levee it off, because Mama Nature and Old Man River will find a way to blow their way through that. So that was an educational experience for several folks. About the same time, the North American Waterfowl Management Plan got kicked around and the process conceived, and Kentucky fell with an area called the New Madrid Project Area. Well, I was on the team on that, and somehow, don't really know how, Scuffletown got listed as a priority site in the New Madrid Project Area. It was amazing how curiosities happen like that. So, again, that's 1978, and the Bottomland Hardwood thing, they want to build that. They want to build it close to a Corps of Engineers facility. Well, we got Newburgh Dam. We got Scuffletown Bottoms area, which has been targeted by about 3 different reports as being a high priority wildlife habitat thing. They seem to go together pretty good. And again, the North American Waterfowl Management Plan comes on at the same time. Scuffletown is identified as a priority site within a national document. This is the third time it's been identified as a high priority site. About 2000, and we're going to jump forward a long way. About 2001, Sam Hamilton was the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of the Atlanta office. He was pretty good friends with Commissioner Bennett. And Sam wanted to see another refuge in Kentucky. And they put together a draft environmental assessment for the proposed establishment of Green River National Wildlife Refuge. Really nice document, which I have one of. Laid out the maps, laid out the goals and everything. Everything was looking pretty good. Sam was very supportive of the idea. And I thought this was really going to happen. I mean, this is like the fourth time we've come up here. And the next thing they do is they produce the final environmental assessment. And for those of you who don't know, getting a final report out of any government agency is 3 acts of Congress, just about. I mean, they talk about a lot of things, they produce a lot of paper, but they don't ever get down to the final stage. And this is looking really good. And then the wheels come off the bus. Sam dies. Commissioner Bennett gets removed. We lose our real good connection with the Atlanta office of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And Scuffletown gets shoved off the face of the earth. You'll also notice the name changed. It changed to Green River National Wildlife Refuge here. I forgot to mention that. So, and then the unthinkable happened. When Sam was in office, there'd been a list put together of 6 proposed national wildlife refuges in the U.S. Green River was number 3. This happened, and in 20 minutes or less, national priorities changed for the next 10 years. We started fighting Middle Eastern wars. There wasn't any acquisition. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service got its budget cut pretty hard. Its staffing levels cut even worse. And it changed the world in no uncertain terms. But there's ways around things. So Senator McConnell introduces Senate Bill 1898, which was the formal congressional action to establish Green River National Wildlife Refuge. That was 2002. The bill was never read in committee, never heard, and never acted on. So again, Green River falls off the face of the earth. 2010, we have a new Secretary of the Interior, Secretary Salazar, and somebody in the Washington office comes up with a grand idea that all future refuges are going to be metropolitan refuges. We're going to target them near where the people are so the people can use them, rather than put them out in Appaloosa, Egypt someplace far from population centers. So we have a proposed refuge that sits between Evansville and Henderson and Owensboro, and Louisville's just down the street, and Nashville's not that far south, and Indianapolis is not that far north. And it's gone through the system about 5 times already. It's the natural fit. You know, you want a metropolitan refuge, you've already got the final document done. All you gotta do is just change the name again, and we've got a final document. And this is cooking with gas. I mean, this is 2010, and suddenly my friends in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Atlanta office are calling me not weekly, but daily, because I'm on the liaison team. This thing is moving. You can't believe how fast it's moving. It's going to happen. You heard that song before? This is going to happen. You're in the middle of a metropolitan area. You've already got all your preliminary documents done. All we got to do is change the name and sign it and go on. And then somebody in the Congressional Budget Office does this. Bet you can't guess what they're gonna ask. Who's gonna pay for it? Little minor problem, you know, what's 200 million amongst friends? Again, we're still fighting a war, big time. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has had its budget cut to over 30% by now, and its staffing level almost at 50. Who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna staff it? So Green River gets shoved off and dropped in the box again. This is a recurring theme for those of you that have not noticed yet. But all is not lost. I-69 gets back in the picture again. And if you're gonna build a bridge and you're gonna build a roadway across bottomlands, you're gonna displace wetlands. And if you displace wetlands by federal law, which has been in place for 40 years or so, you've got to mitigate the wetland losses. And that is not a one-for-one swap, because you're never going to be able to mitigate as good as what you had, probably. So it's usually a 3-to-1, sometimes 4-to-1, and sometimes in really bad cases it's 5-to-1 swap. So if you put a roadway across here and you need 150 acres, and you do 4-to-1, that's 600 acres instantly. The Federal Highways Transportation Department does not want to own public land in Kentucky to build a road on. They would prefer to farm that. They would prefer to get the land for mitigation and give it to another agency to take care of, because it gets it off their books. They don't have to staff it. They don't have to maintain it. They don't have to keep up with it. Everything's cooking along. In the same time, and y'all probably noticed this, these signs started popping up all over the place. Future corridor, I-69. Federal Highways Administration's poured a bunch of money into Kentucky. We're upgrading parkways, we're widening things, we're raising bridges, we're putting up new signage. Everything's kind of headed this direction. And again, they're going to need some. They're going to have a road. I mean, I-69 is going to happen unless something happens to be in the very near future. It's going to happen in my lifetime. I don't doubt that. And if they build it, they're going to have to mitigate it. Not a question. It's just a matter of where and who's it going to benefit the most. So several of us keep raising the idea, if you buy federal lands to mitigate the highway, put them within the boundaries of what would be Green River National Wildlife Refuge. Now you've got an instant federally owned piece of property that the Highways Department does not want, and they would prefer to give it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now you've got a refuge established, and it's just a trade of hands. And I-69 is cooking good. This one is dated 2017, and I kept bouncing ideas off of the Highways Department and the Indiana DOT and the US EPA and US Fish and Wildlife Service. I said, put the mitigation lands inside the proposed boundaries of the refuge. Now you've got an instant refuge. And I'm sorry, I don't speak as much as I used to, and my throat gets dry quick. But so magically, I mean, if you just keep bouncing this ball off of several politicians and their aides and their staff members long enough, you get this phone call and say, "We've got a great idea." And I go, "Really?" And this came from U.S. Highways Department. If we're build I-69 and we cross Scuffletown Bottoms, we're going to mitigate it in Scuffletown Bottoms and give it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I said, golly, that's a great idea. I wonder who came up with that. Well, miracles never cease. So, and then all of a sudden I-69 gets thrown off the table again, because I-69 has been up and down, up and down, up and down about as many times as this refuge has. But it's still out there. I-69, a friend of mine described this, I-69 is like a vulture. It just keeps circling and getting lower and closer and lower and closer. He said eventually it's going to get here. It just got to keep circling. A friend of mine called Chuck Bauer. Chuck's an Indiana resident. He's been highly involved with the Indiana refuges, worked part of the New Madrid project area grants in Indiana, was really heavily involved with North American Waterfowl Management Plan and its implementation in Kentucky, or excuse me, in Indiana. Chuck called me out of the blue one day and he said, Mike, we need to have a breakfast meeting. He said, it's time to get I-69 back on the table. This is 2017. You just saw the newspaper clipping. We're ticking. Things are going good. And we've got to remember, the highway staff has this great idea. They just thought of it. You know, I've been preaching it at them for 10 years, but they just now thought of it. And when it's their idea, it's a good idea. So Chuck produces what he calls a white paper, which is a one-page handout that we can give all the congressional staff and the senator staff and the highway staff and EPA staff and the Corps of Engineers staff and every other alphabet agency that you can think of in the United States of America copies of, because you got to keep it simple. And it basically lays out establishment of Green River National Wildlife Refuge in conjunction with I-69. And suddenly it's a good idea. And it's ticking along, and there's the recurring set of questions come up. It's a constant, everybody you talk to, highways, EPA, Corps, anyway. How are we going to do this and have all the people in Kentucky and all the state and federal agencies to agree to something? That's a miracle within itself. And here's the punchline. And have all the elected officials on board to go with you. Because all you got to do is have one or two hanging out here in opposition to it, and it's dead in the water one more time. And we keep pitching this white paper, and Chuck and I go to everybody's office, and we meet with their secretary and then their administrative aide, and then finally after about the third meeting we get to talk to somebody who's really has the authority to do something. So we put a lot of miles in, lots of phone calls, lots of emails, and lo and behold, out of the clear blue, without any warning whatsoever, remember that first document was about 1/4 inch thick? Check this one out. One thing you gotta love about federal agencies is their titles. Land Protection Plan and Environmental Assessment for Green River National Wildlife Refuge and Conservation Area Partnership. Try to say that 3 times. A very detailed document, much more detailed than the draft one and the first final, the one that was done. Things are looking good. Things are really ticking with gas. Everybody's on board. The service is going to come up with some money. The Southern Conservation Cooperative Unit is going to buy some land and donate it for the initial startup. Everything's rocking. Excuse me, and I hit the wrong button. There we go. And we put out an announcement. Check the date. November 11th, 2019. We're going to establish this place. It's going to be real. I've been here 8 times to this part. Not this close, but this is going to happen. I mean, when they start putting out invitations like this to all the elected officials and high-powered folks around,
Yeah, full color.
this is getting serious.
Yeah.
It's getting real serious. What do you think's happened?
COVID.
Nope, too early.
Ooh. Oh. Post.
Our great congressional leadership on both sides of the aisle, because I'm a equal opportunity abuser. They decided to shut down the government.
Yeah.
For about, I don't know, what was it, 8 or 10 days. And when they shut down the government, no official actions can occur. It's amazing. They can go back in Congress and finally reopen government again, but no official actions can occur. We've been this close. I mean, you have to measure this with a micrometer. We're so close. And I'm about to die. I mean, this is killing me. Because I've been working on this since 1982.
Wow.
And this is 2019. And this is the closest it's ever been other than right before Bin Laden decided to put a plane through the Twin Towers. Because it was gonna happen that year, if it, another 3 months, and it was gonna happen. But miracles happen. We rescind the proposed postponement. We set up a new set of dates, November 22nd at 1:30 p.m. local time. We're gonna get together and we're gonna officially dedicate this place. Southern Conservation Corps donated 10 acres to establish it, so there would be a footprint on the ground. You got Senator McCall, Congressman Comer, Southern Conservation Co-op, Assistant Director of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, another Assistant Director of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They all signed the documents at about 2:30. And we can stand out front and we can take pictures of the sign. This was your sign you were talking about, you wondered where this was. They put this together the morning of. And when they got done taking the pictures, they took it all apart and put it back on the truck because they knew it lasted about 30 minutes with vandalism. But we did lots of pictures. And it finally is real. Lee started this in 1958. This is 2019. And it's the pretty blue goose, and everything's cool. Success.
Wow.
I mean, it's been a rough road, but we're there. Michael Johnson, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service manager at Clarks River, who also inherited Green River Authority at the same time, said, now your work begins. He said, I want a friends group. He said, it took Clarks River 3 years to establish a friends group. This is a group of private, conservation-minded citizens who are willing to work on behalf of the refuge in a variety of roles: liaison to the community, assist with small purchases, generate monies, whatever may need to do, lead tour groups, educational outreach. Clarks River's got a very involved educational outreach in their friends group, which is wonderful. And so Michael said, put together a friends group. He said, be ready, it's gonna take you about 3 years. Well, I'm not a person that likes to diddle around on stuff. We did this November 22nd. I was operational January 3rd.
Kudos.
I put up the first $1,000 so they'd have an account. I put together a group of about half a dozen local folks who had been involved with lots of conservation organizations and DU committees and stuff like that, movers and shakers, and strong-armed a couple of them pretty hard, and we formed a friends group. We want to work on behalf of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to help the service put stuff together, whether it be small acquisitions, small product purchases or materials or supplies or something like that, on the ground activities, educational outreach, whatever we may grow into. Obviously, to do this, you got to have money. And we have put together a pretty good group of folks. We've already gotten 6 life sponsors at the tune of $5,000 apiece. And got a mailing list of about 80 folks that we try to keep a newsletter going to, what's going on. And we're looking for memberships and support. Owensboro has got to be part of this community because it's literally as close to you all as it is to Henderson for this area, and it's going to benefit all of us. And my standard thing at any presentation I do is I tell them, I'll be 68 in December. This is not for me. This isn't for my generation. Sorry for everybody sitting in the room. You're young enough, you'll count, but this is for your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. But if we don't get, this is going to take decades, plural, to unfold, 20, 30 years. It's taken Clarks River 20 years to get 10,000 acres. The service prior to 2023 owned 700 acres that they'd acquired in seven tracts. They made one large purchase this year, 1,300 odd acres. They nearly tripled the place in one easy lesson. And as I did the TV interview this afternoon, when you're very small, it's easy to triple. It's hard to triple from here on. But they have another 100-acre tract that's in acquisition process. And if you want to know something that moves really slow, it's the federal land acquisition stuff. I thought state acquisition stuff was slow. It took 12 to 15 months. The service stuff takes 2 years or better. But we've done an on-the-ground, we've done an on-the-ground project with them already. We reforested 6 acres of bottomland hardwoods. We had the FFA class out and did that, and machine set some and hand set a lot of trees. We also cost shared a pollinators plot. Both of these plots are demo plots near the office and will be the office and headquarters building of Green River National Wildlife Refuge once it gets up and running and fully staffed. But compliments of Congress, it will not be staffed this year. Everything's being done by remote from Clarks River National Wildlife Refuge staff and equipment. They have a building that they've acquired that they hope to convert into an office, but money's not there to operate. They took a 25% cut in budget again, so life is tough. But anyway, we're there. We got it done. I mean,
Could you explain the different, I see the different colors.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, yeah.
I'll try. I'll put this up.
Okay.
Yeah, I can be your Vanna.
You can be, I'll be back. Okay. Yeah, but you can't see that.
That's all right.
Look here, look here. Okay. This is the different colors of the different units. The Horseshoe Bend unit, Green River Island unit, the Scuffle Down unit, what do they call them, the Bluff City unit here. Just break it up for logistics so it's easy to talk about. The proposal for Green River National Wildlife Refuge is to buy up to 23,000 acres from willing sellers, no condemnation, inside of this project area, which is about 50,000 acres. The reason they do that is because you will never ever acquire everything in probably anybody's lifetime. You're going to have some landowners who just simply refuse to sell. That's their prerogative. Remember that this is a partnership area. So the service is looking to work with other government agencies like the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Corps of Engineers, to put environmentally friendly habitats on that ground with or without federal cost share assistance to establish quality habitat there. Most of their acquisition work so far has been in the Horseshoe Bend unit. The tract they bought this year was off of Highway 1078 in Henderson County. I have not even been on the site yet, but
The what?
Highway 1078,
Before that,
Horseshoe Bend unit.
then you
And
said
then-
something, this,
The tract that they bought this year
Oh, okay.
is in Scuffle Down. Audubon State Park is right here.
Oh, okay, that
Oh,
gives me
okay.
some
Give you
perspective.
some reference.
Yeah, I was gonna ask where the sloughs, the Sourhaven unit,
Way over here.
okay, that's,
Except for right there is 185 acres and 2
and
little.
where is 69 supposed to come across?
I-69 is gonna cross right here.
Okay, the other road is the current,
The other road, this is I-69 till it gets to 41, this is 41
okay,
south.
that's
Oh, that's
41.
41.
Okay,
And this is the I-69 corridor.
okay.
Every liaison team I was on, and I was on a total of 6 of them, there was this whole deck of cards put out as potential corridors. Here, one to cross at the Sloughs Wildlife Refuge right in the middle of Diamond Island, which made sense because it's 2 short jumps across the river. We even got to the point where we gauged up how much it was going to take in mitigation to make that happen with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. But this is the only corridor that made sense. Remember that they wanted to cross up here
Yeah.
one time. But like I said, you got to cross
two rivers.
the big river and the little river just to get back high ground. I had the bus tour right down here on Green River Road down here. And I pointed back, I said, you see the trees in the distance? And they said, yeah. I said, you see the trees beyond the trees?
I see
They
that.
go, yeah. I said, that's high ground.
We've all seen when that's.
And the Indiana DOT staff went, you're kidding me. Yeah,
Because they don't venture
Yeah, well,
south of the river.
there's always the short side and the wide side of the floodplain. On that side of the river, that's the short side of the floodplain. On this side of the river right here is the wide side. You get down here around Dogtown, it goes out the other way again on the Indiana side, it meanders. But they had no idea that they were gonna have to, causeway about 3.5 miles of road to get it to work.
They should drive on the highway over here from time to time.
Well, yeah, that'd be good for them. The latest revision that we went from the first draft and the second draft and third draft was to add some of this higher ground stuff that's what they call the Bluff City unit. That's a bunch of reclaimed coal, a lot of it's reclaimed coal mine lands. And there's still some coal under it, and the coal mines are in the mode of, no, we're not going to sell anything. But in the same breath, they're working with Division of Mines and Minerals as far as reclamation authorities and putting some pretty decent habitats back on the ground. Not as good as it could be, but it's a whole lot better than the surface of the moon. So.
Is there any, decent roads through? I know there isn't there on that horseshoe bend, because I've tried that before.
Well, that it's a one-way gravel road in and out.
Yeah.
And the good news is when you get to the best farm up here on the end of the bend, you can turn around and come right back out. Unless you got one amphibious vehicle and you can go across. Green River Road comes down along here. You got 811, Highway 811 comes through across here, and then you got Ohio River 1 and 2 come around. They're all gravel,
Oh, okay.
but it.
What about?
This is the prize target area. I'll be surprised if they make a significant acquisition in that part of the world in my lifetime. The focus in that part of the world is agriculture, big scale, and there's like 100 in this particular tract. There's like 117 different parcels. Is when I did the last deed list on it, and that's been 15 years ago.
Okay, so where is the major land holding now is in the?
Horseshoe Bend area is what they have, and then they acquired this 1,300 acre tract here off of Highway
That
1078.
blue tract?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But it,
Just a small part of it.
yeah, the park is here.
Is there access from 60? I was thinking that I went out 60 and turned right from Owensboro and turned right and went back in there, and there was a parking area
Yep.
and a gate.
Oh, no, that's.
You come off of Highway 60 and you go east toward Owensboro, you
Yeah.
get up onto Charner Road and it'll dump you off down in
You're
here.
talking about like over here, just east, just north of
Yeah,
Audubon, that place.
Yes.
With the boardwalks and all. Is that what you're
No,
talking
no,
No, that's Eagle
no,
Slough.
this was.
No.
I
No, that's
thought it would
Audubon
be
wetlands.
way over here.
Yeah.
No.
That's the
No.
the acquisition
It
that
was,
Audubon State
it looked
Park.
like
Right.
old pasture field grown up,
Right.
could have been.
I know that several years ago, the Sloughs Wildlife Area was designated as an IBA, an important bird area.
Mhm.
What are the chances of that expanding to this area?
it's a logical advancement once you get some habitats on the ground.
Okay, so there needs to be habitat work before.
Well, it's the chicken and the egg. They're gonna have to come at about the same time. But, I mean, this designating as an important bird area will lead credence to making acquisitions there. In the same breath, getting good habitat on the ground, which makes it an important bird area, gives credence to making more acquisitions there. So,
What's the species incidence in this new area? Is it wetlands? Is it similar to?
the focus of habitat is gonna be wetlands and bottomland hardwood restoration.
Yeah, okay.
That's the focus. Obviously, there's gonna be a mix of some agriculture go in with that, because that's just a significant component of the world. But establishment of some bottomland hardwood forest would be very high on the list. Gotta remember, we went back to 1978, that was identified in 1978 as a need for hardwood restoration area.
Somebody came to the Sierra Club many years ago and was talking, I believe, about that Horseshoe Bend area. And the concern they were talking about was that the river may cut off that area. Was
The
that-
U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is scared to death that Mama Nature is gonna blow through right here. And she's tried it about 3 different times. She dug a hole, what was the big flood, 93, 94, Gary? That she dug a hole out there that they sounded that was 90 feet deep. And it was bigger than this building in all dimensions. And she picked all this sand up and moved it about a half mile down the field and dumped it back out. And every time there's a big flood, and I'm speaking Evansville over 42, 44 feet, somewhere in there, she starts scouring holes up through here. And one of these days, she's gonna scour enough holes, she and Old Man River are gonna scour enough holes, they're gonna play that little children's game called Connect the Dots. Now, if you're in the navigation industry, you're coming up here, and if she connects the dots, it's gonna cut the bend off in Evansville, and when it does, it's gonna lower the water about 1.5 feet. They're having to dredge the bend up there to keep it open for navigation already. You lower it 1.5 feet, they're really gonna have to dredge the bend. If you're in the navigation industry and you're coming upstream and you have to turn 90 degrees right, 90 degrees right, and not hit a bridge, can be done, because it's done every day around Cincinnati and Louisville and stuff like that, but it's a serious concern. I did a presentation to an engineering group in Evansville about 15 years ago, and I described it as a non-structural engineering solution to an engineering problem. And they said, "What's that?" And I said, "Who in here owns a broom, a garden rake, and a lawn rake?" And they all held up their hands. If you were to pull the garden rake through the water, how much resistance does it have? Almost nothing. If you pull a lawn rake through the water, it's got a lot of resistance. You pull a broom through the water, it's got a tremendous resistance. When you slow water down, it drops the sediments. It drops the sediments, it builds the land back up, keeps it from scouring so deep, and it forces the flow to, basically it establishes natural berms, and it forces the flow to stay in the channel, which keeps the channel open, which keeps the navigation industry happy. I said, we don't have to build something with concrete and riprap and things like that there. We need to put bottomland hardwood forest back in there, because that will filter that water enough, it'll drop that sediment, it'll build its own revetment.
A natural solution.
Natural solution to an engineering problem. One more thing. When I was at the Sloughs area, we had a little hot bank that was eroding pretty bad due to the navigation industry. And this was it's about 2000. 1 mile of revetment was $1 million. Yeah, name 3 things that hadn't gone up since 1990. Gary?
I was gonna say is a lot of that problem, some of that problem's been solved because a lot of that ground's been put in the wetlands program.
A lot of, there's some significant holdings of some wetland reserve programs up there that's helping
One thing the
that.
map doesn't show the areas that are already, and I'm sure you have other maps, it doesn't show what's already areas that have already been put in
Yeah,
the wetlands program, which helps the project.
right. Years ago, I was on the wetland evaluation team for the wetland reserve program, and there were 3 landowners that signed up here in Horseshoe Bend, and we met one of them. There's a Corps of Engineers biologist, a Natural Resource Conservation Service soil scientist, a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biologist, and a state biologist, me, in a vehicle. We pull up here and the guy stops us on the road and he said, "I'm going to show you all the best bend in the farm, the best farm in the bend." Well, having lived in Henderson County all my life, I know the best farm in the bend, soil quality wise, is up here. He said, it only takes, and you got to remember, we're sitting in a little Chevy Blazer, shoulder to shoulder. He said, it only takes 2 D8 dozers 2 weeks to get it level enough to farm every year. 2 D8 dozers for 2 weeks just to get it level enough after the scour to get it ready to farm. You know who I'm talking about.
But they still want to
But
farm it.
he's still farming it. Yeah, he's still farming. Oh yeah, we got to farm it. It just takes 2 D8 dozers 2 weeks to get it level enough we can get a farm tractor across it. And it
Well,
grows corn
story
about.
then, when they talked to us, they said if they got rid of the agriculture and put in hardwood.
Well,
bottomland,
Mama Nature and Old Man River will heal up a lot of things if you will just let them. But if you constantly disc it, constantly spray it, and constantly dose it, it doesn't have much of a chance. You lay something aside in any of this Ohio River bottomland, you leave it alone for 5 years, and it's going to come up in willows, cottonwoods, and what am I thinking of? Silver maple, thicker than hair on a dog's back. And in a generation, 40, 50 years down the road, she will grow into a real bottomland hardwood forest. Or you can put bottomland hardwood forest there, let all the light seeded stuff come in and try to compete with it, and in 40 or 50 years, we'll have bottomland hardwood forest.
And help me here, what do you consider bottomland hardwood? Oaks?
Oak, hickory, pecan, walnut,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
the things that feed most of the wildlife.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Was there additional state forest property
Yes.
in this neighborhood? Where's that?
Kentucky Division of Forestry owns 700 acres off of Green River Road, #2, and it's this little triangle, this little square right here.
So that's immediately adjacent to Audubon?
The I-69 corridor cuts off about 3 acres of that to get across the corner of it. And excuse me, it's right there. So it'll work out, but you can mitigate small losses like that pretty easy. Thank you, Vanna.
Can I show you a historical fact about that property? I think that people will be interested in. Just one second.
Come on.
I think y'all will really be interested in this. It's gonna shock you. But this area right here was called White City at one time. You know that? And years ago, there was a settlement of people lived down there, and they were all white people. And you couldn't live down there unless you were white. It's the truth. And what happened over a period of years, the water kept flooding all this, and it eroded the electrical lines. If you go back there today, there's huge settlements there where they lived back in there, but they basically got nature kind of ran them out there. So, and, it wouldn't be acceptable today. But if you look on any map, you'll see this is called White City. Sad.
Okay, I've flapped my gums. Questions, comments, cuts, discuss?
Mike, would you go back to the application